Hello, I'm Greg Jeffers, and this is the Flyover Land podcast. Recently, I asserted that we have gone stark raving mad. I didn't mean to suggest that that was a temporary phenomenon. I think we are at the beginning of this rage of madness, and that it has many years to run before it runs its course. It will come in the fullness of time, and we are not there yet. That doesn't mean that there isn't a great deal of hope for the future, but you have to be properly motivated to make the changes necessary to get from here to there, because it is going to be a battle. It is going to be a fight. I am talking about people who believe that we can fix our collective problems by voting. These are the people I'm trying to reach. We can't. We can't fix our problems by voting. We can't make a living by voting, although for several years now, many people have. But I would suggest that that is coming to an end, and that the time has come for those people who are going to succeed, who are going to have their family lines endure, and who are going to provide their children and grandchildren a path to the future, will have to take certain steps and have certain qualities. I'm talking about the noble virtues: courage, self-reliance, industriousness, perseverance. These are critical in a time like this. And the idea, the lazy man's way out is to think that you can vote your way out of this. Yeah, we've got an election coming up next year. Our system does not allow for, it's not a king that we're voting for. And some very powerful interests have figured out that the money is much better spent on judges and prosecutors, and they have truly disrupted the system. The only way we are going to get it back, or let me rephrase that, we're not going to get the whole thing back. That will never happen. You're not going to fix 360 million people that has gone sideways over several generations within a year or two, or an election cycle, or any time frame that is meaningful to middle-aged and older adults. Anything that's meaningful to us, it's not going to happen. It took us generations to get into this mess. It will take us generations to get out. So the question becomes, what can you do for yourself, your children, your family, and your descendants? I've got some clips that I want to talk to you about today. So stay tuned and let's go through these. And I want to point my finger at some of the problems that we have to address in the near term at the individual and community level. I'm not running for president. I'm not running for senator. I'm not running for governor. I'm a Quaker living up in the woods who spends all day thinking about these issues and how we, my people, can best go about preserving a path to the future for our children. So hold on and listen in.
But then last year I read the biography, which I would recommend to everyone in this room, of Peter Wrangel, who was the leader of the revolutionary white forces during the Russian Revolution, the Civil War, rather, that came after the revolution. And he was a Baltic German living in Russia and a general, worked for the Tsar. The war ends, or Russia ceases its hostilities with Germany. He comes back to St. Petersburg. And the country's in complete chaos. And the Bolsheviks have decided that, it's discontent within the army that we need to inflame, and we need to get the army. I don't know if this sounds familiar to anyone here, but get the guns and the people who wield the guns. We need them. So the first thing they do is destroy all discipline in the Tsar's army, complete. So Peter Wrangel's just been on the front for 4 years. He comes back into St. Petersburg, totally civilized city, 2-hour drive from Helsinki. I mean, it is Europe, okay? Whatever anyone tells you. And he's wandering through, and soldiers are going crazy in the streets. And they're raping women, they're stealing at gunpoint. Soldiers in uniform, in a monarchy which had not had any behavior like this at all. And Peter Wrangel just can't even believe it. These are his soldiers, he's a general. And so he's completely freaked out, and he goes into a movie theater, and everyone in the movie theater is completely absorbed in the movie. Like there's no revolution happening outside. And Peter Wrangel thinks these people are insane. So he goes back, he's like, I gotta get to Moscow. So he takes the train to Moscow. I have to tell the Tsar, this country's falling apart. He's very close to the Romanovs, the family. You should read this. It's just out in English translation in the last 3 years. It's an unbelievable book, lost to history until recently to English speakers. So he goes back to Moscow, and he's close to the Romanovs. And so he goes into the imperial court, and he knows all the relatives, and there are millions of them, hangers-on.
Listen very closely to the next 20 seconds of this clip.
And he notices about 80% of the women in the Romanov family are wearing red ribbons in solidarity with the Bolsheviks, who wound up, of course we know how it ends, murdering them in the basement at dawn. So, wait, what? Peter Wrangel says, how is it that this country is being devoured by a violent revolution, and the people who can afford movie tickets, that is kind of our middle class, are refusing even to acknowledge that it's happening, and the ruling class, against whom it is aimed, are sympathizing with it. And if this doesn't remind you of BLM, I don't know what does.
Growing up, I came from a very large family, and there was good cohesion there. I looked to my parents, and at no time would my mother ever consider voting or taking a position against my father. Whatever the family was doing, she was on board. They came to their decisions together, but under no circumstance would she negate my father in any way. As far as she was concerned, a house divided against itself cannot stand. Recently, I spent some time with two veterans, both combat veterans, father and son. The son served in Desert Storm, and the father was in Vietnam. The father had been horribly wounded, lost most of the use of one of his arms, and watched the guy right next to him get killed by small arms fire. So it was up close and personal. Things I imagine were pretty hairy. And these were people of strong conviction. After that experience of the father, the son still went and joined the military. So these are people who are very powerful convictions of patriotism and duty. And the father shared with me this, that what disgusted him most, and this is an 85-year-old man, in his life, was that his wife and daughter did not value his contribution, his thoughts, his sensibilities, and his sacrifices. And they vehemently disagreed with him politically all of their lives, which eventually cost the family its structure. The family broke up and they went their separate ways. But what he said to me was that his ex-wife and daughter would sink the republic, would just blow the United States to smithereens to preserve the right to be able to murder his grandchildren. He was speaking about abortion. He was profoundly pro-life, and his ex-wife and daughter, who had benefited from the family structure. Neither one of these women made any money in their lives. The family was very well off. They had inherited money from previous generations, all of it made by the men. This man was very successful, provided a fantastic life for them. And how did these women repay all of that effort on their behalf? By sinking the family and insisting that the most important thing in their lives was the ability to kill their unborn children. Watch this clip from a TikTok video of some woman protesting the recent Supreme Court decision that remanded Roe v. Wade back to the states.
Yeah! Fucking fuck!
That woman appears to me to be well past her childbearing years. So what's her motivation? Is unwanted pregnancy really a big issue in her life? I think not. I think there's something much deeper going on here. A significant portion of the female population absolutely hates and detests men, maleness, and masculinity. And they want to destroy and kill the product of men, children. And just where did this hatred of men come from? Well, it had to be instilled in these women from someplace. And it is my assertion, my observation, and my contention that it happened in the educational system. We have constructed a school system, especially the public school system, which is dominated by women and for women, and at the expense of the boys, mind you, and the vast majority of the women in that system. Well, they seem to hold deeply anti-male sensibilities. And they seem to have infected the children with it, and those children have now grown up to be incapable of getting along with men and incapable of thinking in terms of having children and raising them and going through the marathon that it takes to raise a child from birth through to a successful adulthood. In my book, and it's the second in the series after 7 Years of Famine, in my book, Stones in the Garden. What's a stone or a rock in your garden? It's an infertile object that breaks your tools and stubs your toe and causes you aggravation. Well, in my book, Stones in the Garden, I brought up the issue of female heterosexual dysphoria. Now, both men and women experience heterosexual dysphoria. It's a term I coined for my book because I wanted to leave behind the LGBTQ, ZRX, this new nomenclature that I just can't even keep up with, and zero in on the real issue of sexuality. Does a person's sexuality, how do I say this? Is it likely to produce children, or is it more likely that they will remain childless? That's the definition of sexuality to me. The rest of it is, it's pretty fungible. So, and what I mean by heterosexual dysphoria is if a young, healthy person is confronted or has the opportunity to be confronted by a beautiful, healthy, vibrant member of the opposite sex who can help them conceive, right, with whom they could make a child. If they experience an existential disgust response to that, that is the definition of heterosexual dysphoria. And in doing the research for my book, I interviewed dozens of women who I felt fit the parameters or fit the definition of female heterosexual dysphoria. And every single one of them was vehemently pro-abortion. Now, none of these women had any risk whatsoever of unwanted pregnancy. In fact, every one of them expressed disgust at the idea of heterosexual activity, which is how I came to the definition of female heterosexual dysphoria, is someone who experiences an existential disgust response to the only forms of sex that can result in conception. The other thing I want to bring up here is that these women invariably couldn't even conceive or wouldn't speak of conception. They would talk about the miracle of childbirth because childbirth is the domain of women and conception is the domain of men. And without conception, there is no childbirth. For every child is born in the pain of childbirth, but every child or every birth began as the exquisite pleasure and joy of conception. And these women were simply incapable of acknowledging that and were disgusted by the very idea of it. And what does disgust do for us? The emotion of disgust. Darwin covered this very well. Disgust keeps us safe. Disgust is when you respond to decaying dead bodies, bad food, bad water, sewage. Your face is disgusting and you want to spit it out. This is to keep you alive. But if a disgust response, let me rephrase, If what you're feeling is a disgust response to the only activity that can continue the human race and who can provide for the next generation that will care for you when you are old, well, it is my assertion that that is the definition of severe mental illness. It was a further assertion of mine in the book that this demographic of women, which is a significant minority, has seized control of the institutions because they don't have families, they don't have husbands. The only thing they have are their careers to give them meaning. And so it is my observation, strictly my observation, my assertion, that these women have infected the women who do not have an existential disgust response towards men, maleness, and masculinity, and who are capable of producing children. But unfortunately, they have corrupted the women who are capable of bearing children. Listen to this.
Well, I'm here now, and I'm not understanding why everybody making a big deal. Y'all told us if we don't want the kids, bring them to the fire station. I don't want the kid. Yes, it's been 3 days, but the baby don't look like my boyfriend. That's not his child. You think I'm finna get broken up with to let him know that this child is not his? No, ma'am. I love the baby. I do, but why y'all, everybody, like, I don't get what's going on. The baby is, it look Asian. The daddy is Chinese. My boyfriend is black. You get what I'm saying? No, I wasn't finna leave my man for that. So the baby had to come here. Are we good? Yes, ma'am. Let's start the interview. Should I cry? Like, should I act sad or something? To act like I care, like to give it emphasis, to make it look like I'm sad or something. Should I act like I care when it start? Come on. I really love my baby. What you mean is live?
Now, for those of you who haven't read my book, 7 Years of Famine, I made the assertion that abortion is about one thing and one thing only: the socioeconomic status of the father or the father's family. If the father is rich and famous, or if the family is wealthy and well-known, the woman will have that baby. And if the man's status is too low, the woman will kill that baby. Women do not abort the children of hedge fund fat cats, tech billionaires, NFL superstars. That just doesn't happen. But of men they consider beneath them or inconvenient to their to where they expect to go with their life, well, that baby is expendable. I further observe the following hypocrisy. You see that feminism has its primary issue is abortion rights. That's the primary and fundamental issue of feminism. But feminism is a Marxist socialist philosophy. And Frederick Engels is, to my mind, the founder of feminism. And, well, think about this. So women make the decision of whether to have the child or not based on the family circumstances or the finances, the personal property of the father. Meanwhile, socialism and communism, Marxism, Engels, they reject the family, inheritance, and private property. So on the one hand, we've got feminism, whose raison d'etre is abortion, and on the other, we have the practical matter of the reason why women commit abortions, murder their unborn children, is over the private property and money rights of the father. You can't make this stuff up. And the inconsistencies and logical fallacies don't stop at abortion. Take daycare. Women wanted desperately to get into the workplace. Who did they think was going to take care of their children? And how were they going to pay for it? One would assume that they would have to know that it would have to come from the earnings that they were bringing in from leaving their children someplace else. Or was the plan to have no children, which is what I think most feminists, because they suffer from female heterosexual dysphoria, most of them were not considering childcare. And for the heterosexual women who are caught in the crossfire, they are now trapped in a terrible financial conundrum. It's not even a conundrum. It's a negative feedback loop that is destroying their well-being. Here, listen in.
We are depleting our savings dramatically. We take $10,000 a month out of savings, sell our stocks, whatever my financial advisor does. I don't actually even know because I don't want to know because it makes me ill to think about, because I had a good nest egg to buy a house at one point in life, and now it's paying for daycare.
And that's coming from a couple who are highly educated, high IQ, high industriousness, high in conscientiousness, probably from intact homes and with a solid community around them. This is, an unusual circumstance. Many Americans have none of that. How are they going to function in all of this? And look, I think we've gone stark raving mad. Some of us are more insane than others, but on the whole, we've gone stark raving mad. And we have to start looking around at why and what can we improve in our personal environment that might lead us back to a place of sanity. And again, we can't do it for everyone. We have this huge system built out. We're going to have to endure this for a few generations and watch a lot of people go through this. This is a self-rescue mission. Anyway, listen to this clip.
There was an experiment in the 60s named Mouse Utopia. They did this experiment over 30 times and it got the same results. They put 9 mice into a giant cage which had space for 5,000 mice. They gave the mice as much food as they wanted and made sure there were no plagues. The mice and their numbers rapidly ballooned to over 2,000. Past a certain point, they started to see breakdown. Female mice became more aggressive, masculine, raised children improperly, and refused to breed past a certain point. Male mice became effeminate. Their feminine hormones skyrocketed, and they were constantly grooming themselves but not breeding. There were colonies of homeless mice. The mouse social structure completely broke down as mice became incapable of maintaining relationships. The mob started destroying the families of the few mice who kept breeding. The mice stopped having children, and their population collapsed until the mouse colony completely fell apart. Doesn't that sound somewhat familiar? Ever since I read the Mouse Utopia experiment, it's haunted me. I worry that this is our future.
Doug, why don't we start with what made big American cities attractive places to live in the past in the first place?
You want to be with other people that are doing things, building things, creating things. That's number one. That's why people have always lived in cities. It's convenient. It lends itself to specialization and division of labor. You don't have to make your own meals. You can go to a restaurant.
As a big girl,
as a big person, look different than the norm. Larger bodied people, as a larger bodied person.
plus size women in bigger bodies.
As a plus size woman, curvy, curvaceous woman, and
Other women who looked like me.
Other women who look like me. Look at how many words she had to use to say fat. She used 6 words to describe one. Imagine how inconvenient it would be if we all had to use 6 times as many words just to describe what we were talking about.
Yes, people, well, since civilization has arrived, people have always lived in cities, but let's define what a city is. A city 2,000 years ago might have been 12,000 people, not 50 million people stacked on top of each other. There's something going on here. Now, what do you see in our cities today? Extremely low fertility and extremely high obesity. It's not a coincidence. At least I don't think it's a coincidence.
Вот, как бы, но при этом они помимо работы, они содержат, занимаются и огородами, то есть они вот вообще деревенский житель, он как мужчина, так и женщина, они гораздо больше умеют. То есть мужчина умеет, соответственно, там по дому из-за необходимости, да, в деревенских условиях самому все это делать. Вот, и когда мужчины переезжают из деревни в город, то есть они там, ну, просто золотые руки у них. Вот, а женщины, соответственно, ну, вот, выращивать, заготавливать, то есть все вот девчата, вот, которые моложе меня возрастом, они все домашние заготовки, только сезон закончился, сразу же там все это соление, варенье, то есть все вот это вот умеют, сами могут. То есть, а в городе вообще такая тенденция, что молодое поколение, ну, девушки, женщины, они разучаются готовить. То есть они вообще не готовят ни для своих семей, ни для своих мужчин. То есть это на самом деле вот, ну, проблема.
В магазине.
Да.
В деревне все попадают в естественную среду и занимают свое место. В городе люди очень зачастую не знают, чем заняться. И для этого им нужны развлечения. Человек деятельный по своей натуре. И им нужны центры развлекательные, торговые, кино, ну что-нибудь такое.
Время
это, в принципе, неплохо само по себе. Но когда кроме этого ничего нет, начинается деградация. И самое грустное, что она происходит постепенно.
Незаметно.
И потом мужчина появляется живот, приходит домой, пиво, пульт телевизора. Телевизор его постоянно там ему мозг прочищает.
Listen closely over the next 8 seconds, because this Russian babushka really hits the nail right on the head.
И потом
мужчина становится женщиной, а женщина становится мужчиной.
And this is why I think we're just beginning, or we're in the beginning of the road to complete insanity. What are we going to do? Relocate all of New York City to some better environment and spread them? It's just not going to happen. We've built what we've built, and we're going to endure what we have to endure here, much like the mice in that experiment. There's nothing to be done on the macro level. We'll just keep kicking the can down the road until enough people have stopped making children, or they've killed each other with nuclear bombs, that we have a world that can be sustained. Nature will find a way. It will. We as individuals have to make a decision on where we are going. Do we want to live with like-minded people in small communities and have families and live that lifestyle? Or do we want to go to the cities and eat and drink and drug and, have multiple sexual partners every year? You have to make these decisions, and you have to live with the consequences of them. It's not easy. There's a lot of temptation involved here, and there will be bills to be paid. Yeah, you can take the libertine avenue, and it'll be fun for a while, but the day will come when you realize that your opportunities are now past and that you are fully committed to this. And that's a tough time. It'll be a tough time in a lot of lives. It's also, in the final analysis, it's also completely unsustainable. At some point, we will get back to arranging families, arranging heterosexual relationships, encouraging those relationships to remain together, imperfect as they are, for the benefit of raising intact and well-adjusted children. We can't continue to run society with a bunch of crazy people, or we can, but we'll just have, shootings in schools and shootings in bowling alleys and people jumping out of windows and overdoses and obesity and abortions and people screaming in the streets. It's no way to live your life. It's no way to live a life. We have a very brief amount of time. What was the famous saying? We are a brief flash of time sandwiched in between two vast periods of darkness, or two infinite periods of darkness. That's what our life is. Do you want to spend it in protest because you're angry? Maybe you're angry about whatever. Do you think that's going to fix anything? If you do, well, then keep at it. I'm trying to reach the people who are willing to think otherwise and who are willing to commit themselves to something else. There are communities out there. These are lifeboat communities. You can get into one of these lifeboats. If you're a worthwhile person, if you're a worthwhile family, if you're someone who has value that you can add, they would welcome you. It's time to make some decisions. It's time to do some thinking, and it's time to plan ahead. Anyway, that's enough for me today. Thank you. I'm Greg Jeffers for the American Quaker Friends Church. Hi, I'm Greg Jeffers, author of the best-selling book, Prosperous Homesteading. I'm an author, writer, blogger, and homesteader. This is my labor of love. My latest novel, 7 Years of Famine, is available now at Amazon. Thank you.